All About Kingfisher here to live stream this event. I think it behooves us to start on time. I thank everybody for being here. This is a sign-up sheet. Please be sure and leave me with that. Leave me with your name and information if you would. This is actually a required meeting because we are in the process, the city is in the process of applying for a grant for federal funds, and it's very important that the public be informed, right? This is all about making good decisions, and as we weigh things about the budget, about all these details, the public meetings have a real important role to play in making the best choices and alerting us to certain trade-offs and all. So you may wonder why I'm here leading this meeting. Okay, so let me just say a couple of words about that, or a couple minutes about that before we get on to the business at hand. Okay, I'm John Gooden. I head Kingfisher Trails, and I have headed it since it started 22 years ago. Okay, and along that process, we've had tremendous success with grants. We have just completed our 15th major grant for Kingfisher Trails, and we have won every time we've applied. I also wrote the grants for the park across the street over here, and that's significant for this particular effort because the very same authority that makes the awards for that would be the same one that would be applied for here. It is funds from the National Park Service, and it's through the National Park Service Land and Water Program, and that over there we got two grants, one for $350,000, another for $490,000. All of that federal money through the National Park Service. This would be a much smaller thing than either of those, and it's a one-to-one match. And it's interesting in this case, like I did over here in the park. The city, it's not city money, okay? It just isn't city money. What I've come up with is a way for Bill and the airport board to secure some land and do some cleanup, some mitigation that will avoid spending all the money that they have secured for lengthening the runway. So why am I here? I'm here because this is just kind of one of those things I do for the city, right? I'm not under contract with the city. I'm not employed with the city at all, okay? I'm volunteering here, okay? So I volunteered to help Bill a year and a half ago with just a little bit of language to help him secure a grant to lengthen the runway. It's for 1,400 linear feet more, right? 1,200 linear feet extension to the runway gets you to 4,000, right? And that grant is for how much? $2.7 million. Okay. Well, Bill, after he got that, I had that little part to play, so I kept checking. Bill, how's it coming? How's it coming? Well, Bill said, well, actually, John, do you know of some place around town that has a wetlands? Because we got a wetlands problem. I said, oh yeah, Bill, I know just the place. And do you know Harry's Hole? And he said, no. So the next day I showed him a little place called Harry's Hole. And from that has launched this effort. We all got, you guys before you leave should be a little bit of a local expert about it. I'm not going to keep you long, but it's not that hard, and I think you'll understand it. I'm so grateful you're here. I'm so grateful if you bring questions that we might have a chance to address that. A big part of it will be a discussion about money, whose money, and where it's coming from. Just know I am not trying to spend city money, okay? city's not paying me, and I'm not trying to ask for city money for any of this, okay? I'm instead asking the city, they've already approved and unanimously applying for some grant, that the people that have worked with us on trails are putting together. I'm happy to talk about that. I'm happy to talk about how it scores, and I've got lots of information I could tell you if you want it, and we'll talk specifically about the budgets and all. But just know at the outset, I'm not trying to spend city money, okay? So we'll get right into it. Oh, it's already gone away, has it? Yeah, computers do that. They go to sleep while you talk. Okay, so this whole area is the north end of the airport. Okay, right here, this bright white bit is what you can see of the north end of the current runway. Okay, so we see some pretty satellite imagery there with trees and all. This border, that if it just in a straight line with the current runway, these lines here describe the other 1,200 linear feet. Okay, so it doesn't actually run over any trees. You know, they thought when they applied for the money, and it was a rush deal, but they thought we'd be okay. Well, turns out it's federal money, and you can't use it right here because there's property that is actually recognized wetland area. Okay, wetlands is not defined specifically by something where the water stands all the time, okay? That is not the definition. A definition of a wetland is defined by the soil type and the plant life, okay? So this has all been an education to me. If you go out there and you look, it's not gonna look to you like a wetland, right? It's not like they went out and applied for a grant knowing they got a wetland trouble. It wasn't until they did the soil sampling and all that they realized, oh, this is a wetland. Okay, so that means that they're going to have to come up with a solution, right? Because it's federal money. You can't just fill it in. And I want to be careful about this because Bill's already told me I don't want to say we're filling in the stuff. We're not. I mean, look, you can see there's water here, you can see there's these trees. The plan at the airport is not to fill it in. In fact, the drainage will be better out there than it is currently.
I mean, if I can address, and I know there's a lot of people from the Country Lane addition here, and I know that these are our airport neighbors to the east of us on Airport Road, and I'm assuming y'all are here because of the concern what's going to happen to Country Lane. Actually, it's going to be better drainage than it was. Okay, as far as the airport property, now we can't do anything about the creek once it leaves the airport property, but and if I may, John,
yeah, please.
I'll just real quickly show y'all.
They're here to hear this sort of thing.
I know there's some concern because I've already heard from one of the neighbors. So originally, the original plan was, this is the water coming, this is Luana Creek. Okay, it's named a creek and it's a blue line on a map, so it's under the jurisdiction of the Corps of Engineers. That's kind of where this whole thing started. So, original plan was as soon as the water came under the road, got onto the airport property, they were going to do, there's always going to be, okay, they were going to straighten it out and run it down here and go under the runway, okay? Well, but they know in big rains that there's going to be more water than this little channel, this straight channel that they were going to build could handle. So they had a diversion, a big diversion built to divert any, or plan to divert any overflow that this channel right here can't handle and take it down to the creek, okay, at the property line. Now, through the whole wetlands deal and the area that John's going to show you, when we said, well, we're going to, disturb the wetlands, the federal government said, well, if you disturb a wetlands, you have to, either replace it, you have to replace what you disturb. One of the plans was we were gonna do it on airport property. But it still wasn't going, I mean, it's not ideal. You can't, you know, wetlands and airport don't really go together because you have trees. They're gonna require, any trees that grow up in the wetlands, we can't prune. Well, trees and airplanes don't go together very well. So that's when I went to John and said, hey, we got a problem. And I knew John, you know, has sources that I don't have. So when John came up with that. So now, because of the area that John has identified isn't quite enough to satisfy the wetlands requirement, we're going to leave a little bit of the creek here. And instead of cutting it right across here, we're going to leave a little bit of the natural creek. And then the diversion is going to start right here. I don't know how many feet that is. My engineer does. And then this right here, they're going to leave this little bit right here. And then this is a drainage, the normal, for normal like right now. You know, there's not a lot of water running. Sometimes no water runs in it at all. And it's going to take it down here, go underneath the runway, and then it's going to go into the drainage
Flows
ditch.
the other way. Right. Which direction does it flow?
It flows to the south.
Does it? Okay.
South
sorry.
and east, yes. And then it'll go here. But once it, you know, we have no control once it gets past. But we're not going to create more water. I mean, we're just diverting the water that flows down the creek right now. Actually, this flow is going to be more efficient on our property. I can't control what happens after it gets. And I think y'all's problem happens over here.
What about the increase of the water from the runway?
The what? I'm sorry?
The increase of the water from the runway.
I mean, it won't, I mean, there'll be some runoff. The runway's only 75 foot wide. So it doesn't, there's not a lot of water shed off the runway anyway.
Yeah,
And it'll be, you know, they build it like they do a road, you know, yeah.
The map of this floodplain is absolutely enormous. You know, the amount of additional runoff on that.
So I have a question.
Really, really
If you're diverting that water and you're making it flow on the airport better, what happens when it gets over here? Now we've got this abundance of water flowing through the airport. Well, I mean, it's going to have two different channels to go through, right? Am I understanding that correctly? No? It's not going to go.
Normally, normal flow is going to remain on the west side of the runway. But, you know, there's going to be some drainage. I mean, but the thing is, that water is, it doesn't matter whether the natural creek is there or whether our drainage is there, you're still going to get the same amount of water.
Right. I just
And it's
didn't know
going
if
to
it was
go into
going
the creek.
to be more water flowing through there since you guys are opening
Well,
that
but
up
there won't be
to get
more.
jammed up, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there won't be more. It's just, it's the same amount of water. You know,
Well,
we're not producing water.
I mean, you're obviously extending the runway out, going north, that's what I'm assuming. I came into this a little late, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is that gonna cause a potential dam process
No.
with it going further north?
No, because the way it's designed is we're going to have some drainage on the west side of the runway and drainage on the east side of the runway. So there's ability for the water to move. Yeah, it's not going to, you know, I mean,
And also, I mean, by looking at it, you're gonna build more of a waterway that's gonna be
Yes.
deeper. So technically, it could potentially hold the water back a little bit
Slow it
less
down.
and slow it down so it doesn't get.
yes.
Okay,
slow
that
it
was
down.
my question,
advertently
like,
go-
are we,
Yeah, it's gonna slow
are we
the water
increasing the
down,
flow or
'cause it's
slowing
gonna
it
be
down?
wide.
Yeah.
I think they said, I can't remember, it's 75, it's as wide as the runway, 75 foot wide.
Yeah.
You know?
Cause
And-
currently it's backing up because it can't hold and you're gonna make
Right.
basically a pond, potentially,
Yeah.
to hold that water. So we'll slow the flow
Right.
down.
Yeah. And I know I got contacted by Lori Rule about, they had some water, because of the well, I guess, that they drilled to the west of their house. It may have affected you guys too, I don't know. And they had to do some work there. But I can't see how, this isn't going to affect the rules at all. And I can't see that it would be anything but more efficient than what's there now.
Okay? So, oh, go ahead.
So do you have hydraulic and hydrology studies? And are they where somebody can see them?
The question is, are there hydrology studies in there?
I would assume there are, that our engineers have done that, but I don't have them.
So you don't,
We didn't request the engineer
No.
come tonight.
No,
But he's been very available.
yeah.
And I would, if you've got such questions, I think Bill could present those and get you the data pretty easy.
And Bill, just the background too, you know, when we were trying to find out how to mitigate water issues in Country Lane, I had the Army Corps come out and do a study. And you're right, there is quite a bit of water that comes in the floodlands there, and so.
I mean, it's better than it was just
Yeah.
because Scott's went up there and built that big pond, you know, but his pond's full. I think there's a lot of natural water. There is a lot of groundwater there. I mean, we experienced that on the airport too. The ground is saturated, and that's part of the reason we're dealing with the wetlands is because the ground's saturated.
Well, I do know with Scott's, once it starts to overflow, and I mean, of course, it's kind of, I don't want to say 100-year flood, because it's not quite flood, but if it starts to get backed up and everything, it has ran down the road to that oil location
Okay.
behind Rules, where there is a natural gradient
So his-
that hits
his
towards,
spillway, basically.
basically a spillway where it goes to the backside of that oil pad. And it gets to Larry's house, my neighbor's house, mine. I mean, it got within 2 inches of coming into my house.
Oh.
I had a sump pump that was in my storm shelter and pumping it out of my kitchen window.
So, you know, I mean, we can't do anything about the water on the road or north of the road.
Correct. But
What
concerns is could this
what
back
we're doing
up?
is more efficient than what's present on our property or the airport's property. More efficient as far as draining, you know.
Where does Luann go? Does it go across the road?
It goes on,
13th
well, if
Street?
you-
Is that what
it-
goes
it
under
goes
13th?
The little bridge, you
Uh-huh.
know, south of Country Lane, but then if you look out, is what
Goes
gets
towards
me is,
81.
when you look out toward the east, it's not there at all. It flattens out to nothing.
Okay,
You know, and was kind of one of my arguments, it's like it's a creek to nowhere because it doesn't even,
Floating.
and that's part of the flooding problem
Yeah.
around 81, is that creek gets out there and there's no place for it to go.
okay.
You know, it really needs to be directed
Yes.
toward the creek, toward Kingfisher Creek is what
Yes.
needs to be done.
All right, well, so I think we kind of defined the problem for everybody. I mean, in terms of what the airport is facing. So this meeting is really about a solution. The airport is operating in a very, very regulated situation, right? It's federal money, and the Army Corps of Engineers itself is going to have to approve all of this, right? So that brings in a very high bar of the documentation and the scoring of how they decide whether what is to be done meets the needs. So they have pros. They've got an engineer who's involved in designing how these channels ought to be dealt with, and they have a biologist who's done a mitigation plan, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's what you actually have a copy of on your tables. I didn't bring copies of everything, so sorry about that. First, I want to talk about where we are. Okay, so I'm going to just to kind of give you the right sense of where things are, right? Bowman Avenue, top. Here's the Union Pacific Railroad. You can see the KFC thing right here, okay? Here's United and Atwoods right in here. Maybe here. Yeah. But anyway, Main Street, then is right over here. Here's what I always think of as a major mobile home park. It's got a new name now, I know. But anyway, mobile homes here, okay? So you got Uncle John's Creek making this oxbow right there. Everybody understand kind of where we're at? Okay? So in other words, this farm is the green space that you see from Maine behind Atwoods, all right? It's just, it's the wheat field back there, okay? Well, so when I heard from Bill that he had this problem with wetlands, I've spent a lot of time working the map in Kingfisher, and I told him, hey, I got a wetlands for you. Well, what I was talking about was this right here. It's Harry's Hole. It is just south of land that Debbie Burpo's family has. And hers includes some forested land here and some that's not. But anyway, the city owns this in pink. This, if you go back there, is really quite a beautiful area. The trees, and there's some water. It's not always standing with water, but it's really quite lovely. Lots and lots of birds. The problem is, as you drive in here, you come in and a little drive here, and then there's this huge dump right there. I think, I don't know who's dumped there. But anyway, there's a bunch of stuff there, okay? Well, for our purposes, that's a good thing, okay? And here's why. Because the biologist has come and taken a look at this, and my original idea to expand it does not help the airport. It doesn't help them at all. And the reason is because there's no stream into it. That's just a wetland that catches water that runs into it, you know, because it's low, but there's no stream. So it's not a regulated, you know, thing that the Corps of Engineers would care about. So we can do whatever we want to there, the Corps doesn't care, okay? However, this little thing that's like, it's a pretty blue line here, that would make you think there's water in it, but it's actually a big ditch, okay? Unless there's a rain, there is no water in it. It's a big ditch, okay? And it goes through a little pasture area, you know, there's wheat here and there's wheat back here, and this is pasture, and this is just, you know, more pasture, okay? So, well, the biologist looked at it and he said, hey, that will score. That we could use that to do the mitigation thing. Well, okay, so me doing what I'm doing, I'm trying to think, well, okay, so city doesn't own that. That means they have to buy it, probably. And so how are they going to do that, right? They have a fire station to build and all that stuff, right? So I'm very familiar with grant funding like we used over here in the park, right? It's National Park Service money. Through what's called a land and water grant. Well, a land and water grant it's a 50-50 grant. So, you know, you spend $1, they'll give you $1, okay, for the $2 together. Well, okay, so it has some nice fits for what the airport needs. They love, it's this National Park Service money, they love to do things like build wetlands, plant trees, build walkways and trails into those spaces. And they set those spaces aside in perpetuity, which is also what Bill's thing has to be, okay? Meaning forever, okay? Well, all of that's a good fit, but you still have just half the money. Well, so I had this idea that, okay, well, we just put a corridor that links Harry's Hole and the dump to this area, and then guess what? The DEQ has money for cleaning up the dump. That money doesn't require any matching funds. It's 100%. You just apply, they give you the money, and guess what? It's state money, and you can use state money to match federal money, and so that's the other 50-50 of your deal. Okay, so. So I told the city council about it, told the city manager about it, told Bill and company about it, and so there's a company called CLS and Associates. They've been our trail designers since we started 22 years ago. That they're working on it. They're getting a grant ready, and by golly, I talked with them today. They are really excited about this. they know how they score, and it looks like we're not leaving any points on the table. Okay, so I want you to take what we're talking about here seriously, okay, because the chances are very good that it will happen. Okay, so it's very important that we get your feedback and not just think, oh, well, this is something that won't likely happen. It likely will. Okay, so what would we do? We would clean up the this Harry's hole thing. Now that you got that, I'm going to do the zoomed in thing. Everybody understand where it is, right? Okay, I'm going to exit this. I'm going to bring up the thing that you've got on your tables. Okay, let me help you understand. Now that you know the big picture where it is, here's a zoom in. This is created by the biologist. All these yellow dots are trees. So 180 or so trees, and these green things are also trees. Okay, there are two areas they're calling wetlands. And now again, these are wetlands not defined by a lot of standing water. They're wetlands defined by the plants, because we're going to have one area that's called forested woodlands, wetlands, and another here, you see there's no trees, it's called emerging wetlands. Emergent or emerging, I don't know. Anyway, so there's those two areas, and they score this thing by turning the eroded ditch into a riparian. You know that word? Riparian is like all this gorgeous stuff around Uncle John's Creek. You know, the cottonwoods and the beautiful trees. Well, they're going to take the eroded ditch, plant a bunch of trees, turn it into a riparian area, and voila, you've got something that the National Park Service would like to fund. Okay, and it's got to have public access. Let me see if I've explained it. Forested and emergent, and all the trees. Water. We should talk about the water, because this is, it's a floodplain, right? So how does it affect the flow of the water? Okay, that is an important thing. So these would actually, we'd have to move a lot of dirt to create these, okay? Because they're not going to be full of standing water so much, but they will be sort of catch basins, okay? So water will run in there when there's a lot of water, and then it slowly leaves, okay? So that's part of what defines it as a wetland. Okay, so its effect on the floods and all in Kingfisher actually is very, very positive. It's like what they do, anymore, where when they build a big building, they have to get those big, things to slow down the water. Well, this has that effect, right? It's a huge catch basin that this whole area is about 10 acres. Okay, so we'll be catching the water and slowing it down. The stream, the ditch itself, there are some options. We could do something that would slow the water down a little bit as it goes, so that it might actually have some water in it. That's not my decision. That's more the biologist and engineer's decision. But it's something we could do. In terms of, if people are going to be out there walking, it's sure nicer to see some water in it than to just see the empty ditch.
Will you try to get a trail out there?
Glad you asked that question. Now that is partly why I'm here and why I care about this, okay? Because right now we have a plan, we have funding, okay, that will let us build from the swinging bridge. Like our trail comes through the park and ends at the swinging bridge, picks up on the other side of the swinging bridge, comes down to Bowman and stops. Okay, well, we'd sure like to get from Bowman to Will Rogers, because we would so much like to be able to do this whole loop around the community.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I am not here to force the city to build a trail through this thing, okay? But it will be the corridor that we would later apply for some funding to build through, right? Right now, we don't have rights to do anything there. Yeah.
Who owns the land south of the city's land?
Good question. I'm glad you asked that. It is an LLC called FK&F, which stands for Francis, Kenny, and Francis. It's John Francis, John Kenny, and Danny Francis. Danny Francis is the only one of those three that lives here locally. He farms it. Used to be the Connie King farm. If you've been around long enough to remember it as the King farm. But Connie passed away, and her estate, anyway, I don't know what happened, but the FK&F bought it or got it somehow. And so, anyway, that's who owns it. And they would get an appraised value for what this is. We've had meetings with them. I think John Kenny, who's kind of the leader of that group right now, he's coming to town tomorrow to tour it. And anyway, they're very civic minded. You'll notice out there at Walmart, there's a big stone that says the Francis Nature Trail. Well, it's the same people, not Danny Francis, but the other two, who let us build trail behind Walmart and all the way over to the nursing home, and then recently from the nursing home over to 13th Street. Same people.
So
Yeah,
this, I'm sorry.
Public access to this area then, is that going to be dependent upon the trail that you will put in?
Well, another good question, Debbie. So, public access in one way will be guaranteed in the deed. Okay, the city will have to say in the deed that public will have access to the property in perpetuity. Okay, but in terms of the grant, they'll want to know how are we going to let people there, right? I would think, honestly, that this whole area is going to maintain as a fairly wild area. I think if people are going to go out there to hike or whatever, go see the creek, it's going to be nature hiking. It's going to be wild, okay? However, I think on that previous thing where I showed the corridor, right here, up to Harry's Hole, I think we will eventually plan to have a trail there, a trail along here, and a trail down to Will Rogers. So that would be my personal answer to public access. But again, I don't want to say that I've got Jim on board for doing a trail all along there. I haven't. All right. Yes.
It's required to have public access to be part of the grant or no?
It is.
So what time frame would you have to provide that public access?
Well, okay, so let me back up to that other slide, because I think that's an important part of the answer. It's Harry's Hole, this one. Okay. So, for the grant purposes, the boundary area is going to be defined by everything in green, everything in pink. Okay? So today, if a person wanted to, you can come off of 3rd Street and drive back there, look at that dump and walk.
I've been back there, it's a mess.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, you've been there, nice. So, from the city's point of view, they're not going to put up a gate. They're guaranteeing that people will have access to that. It will be safer.
Right now it needs a gate because people continue to dump back there.
Yes, right. So people continue to dump. Right now you have to pay to dump, so that's the way you just go illegally and dump. It's terrible, okay. Right, it'll be posted and there'll be efforts made to stop that, okay. And then we'll have this corridor down here, and we will, your question was the time frame. So, so let me talk about time frame for the whole thing, okay? So, Bill and company at the airport need a decision on what to do on the mitigation side. I think they basically decided they're going to do this because it's cheaper to do this and more effective. It's not planting trees on an airport that they can't prune. I think they're going to do this. Okay, so the question then becomes, well, how much of their money are they going to have to spend on this? Can I help them, you know, preserve some of what they got so they can still get the runway? Well, so that time frame is they're going to chug along. They're going to start. They've already got paperwork ready for the Corps of Engineers. They're starting that process. Now that may take a while. Corps of Engineers may take a year and a half. I think that's all realistic. Okay, so for this grant that I'm talking about, the deadline to apply is a week from tomorrow, January 31st. Okay, and so then, January 31st, then they notify us probably in June whether we won, maybe a hair sooner, but probably in June. And then they have to get the certification that we don't have any tribal problems, you know, that sort of thing, which might take another few months. Okay, and then eventually they will give us a contract, give the city a contract that gives them 2 years to implement.
And in that 2 years, they would have to provide access?
Yes. So by the end of the 2 years, by project closeout, that has to be done. Okay, it probably will happen sooner than that. Although, again, I'm just volunteering. I don't work for the city. Okay, but I would think that all of that would transpire sooner. I am going to offer the city, because I've done it before so successfully in the park, to handle the grant if they get it, right? You know, getting the paperwork in and filed and all of that to keep them in compliance. So there are some interesting things that happen, okay, over those 2 years. We're going to have 2 cycles of recreational trails grants. They're also due every January, okay? Well, again, I'm not here to tell you that Jim and company and the council, you even talked about it, okay? But I will be hopeful that Kingfisher Trails can work out something to provide access to this area as it opens up. There are grant funds that would coincide with this, and we've had a lot of success competing for it. Okay?
So your proposal is that these grant funds would pay for that access?
Yes. Yes. You know, in all the 22 years of Kingfisher Trails, we have never appeared on the city's budget, right? There was a time when the city had me under contract to do, you know, some stuff with the park, and before that, they had me worked with this downtown streetscape. That was my baby, and the artist in residence thing I did for a bit. But apart from just what they were paying me for that service, Kingfisher Trails has never been on the budget, okay? This would be the same sort of thing. I would not expect that any of the public access money I'm talking about is going to end up costing the city pretty much anything. Brian, you're coming up here. You have something you want to say?
I just wanted people to know that you are not alone. Okay? And I am with you on this, and I'm part of the effort towards trying to get this done. So that's why I chose to stand up here.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yep.
So
He's been with me since 22 years ago, too.
So with this mitigation here, this is going to help with the airport water flow, is that right? With this wetlands down here, am I understanding that right?
So it's a trade-off.
Okay,
All right. So.
Rob Peter to pay
if
Paul
the-
type deal.
One doesn't have to do with the
Right,
other.
so if the airport,
Still-
so the airport has their soils and they have their plants. Well, you know, we would end up actually having to transport some soils from out there here to help us identify soils as the proper type. It's amazing. But anyway, all of that is really not my bailiwick, but it's the engineer and the biologist that Bill and company have under contract, so.
So they'll move dirt out of the airport and then put dirt.
It's a good question, Bill. What are you
Or
gonna
do
do
you use that
after you
for your
take
drainage?
dirt out? Are you gonna put dirt in?
Probably a
We
question
don't know
for the
yet?
engineer. That's not a question for me to answer. They're going to have to do some excavating for the runway, you know, because you gotta, and any of the dirt, they were gonna have to remove some soil anyway. So the soil that they're removing is just so happens to be the kind of soil that John
Okay.
needs for his wetland over there.
That
So it's
makes
kind of a, like I said, it's a trade-off.
Okay.
You know, and the whole purpose, like Jonathan was asking, is it helping the airport with their drainage? It's just helping us with the issue that we have with federal red tape, the wetlands, and mitigating the wetlands that we're going to, they just won't let us, you know, change the course of the creek and not make it a creek any longer without a plan to replace it. It really doesn't have any effect on our plan at the airport, other than the fact that we're not going to have a live creek running through the airport.
So, you know, Kingfisher has lots and lots of green space, right? We have a lot of parks. We have a brand new park, right? So, you know, I think the city manager would tell you that the Parks Department has already got an awful lot to manage, okay? So I don't think that this area is gonna be a groomed area at all. We're talking about, you can't groom it, that's absolutely right, you can't.
cannot be
It's gotta be natural.
So-
It's gotta be natural.
It's gotta be natural, right? So, what's the cost to the city? Well, they can't maintain it, they gotta just allow access to it. So, you know, I really am not forecasting that the budget implications are really significant at all.
So John, if you can't maintain it and it has to be wild, then maybe why would you want a trail going through there? You can't weed eat it?
You can maintain the trail.
You can,
You can
okay.
maintain along the trail.
Okay,
Okay, and like Kingfisher Trails has been doing, you know, like we do out there behind Walmart and stuff. We mow to each side. You can do that. What
Okay.
Bill's saying is, like if a cottonwood grows up, you can't prune the cottonwood.
okay.
right? Which
Or you
is
can't
a
go in
problem
and
at
brush
the
hog the
airport,
entire area.
right? Because,
And the hope would be that many trail users would see that as a real positive.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be kind of a chance to have a countryside experience
Yeah,
on the trail.
yeah, I agree.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly would see it that way.
Like John mentioned, that Harris Hole area, he took me out there and I was like, wow, this is really neat. It was quiet, it was, you know, just a little pond there and some trees around it. So basically, that's what they're developing on this old eroded drainage ditch.
Yeah.
A really nice, natural area,
Mhm.
you know, that people can enjoy.
Guys, this oxbow here is phenomenally nice. There's a tree out there, I haven't seen it recently, but years ago,
Last
we
time we
went out
measured,
there.
it was 21 feet circumference.
21 feet in circumference, right?
It would be the largest cottonwood in the state if not for a technicality. And,
Yeah. Well, where is it? It's right about there, okay? Well, you know, that's just pretty cool. We had a lady come out here 20 years ago who was with the Audubon Society, and she had been a state biologist before, like the state biologist, and she couldn't believe the birds that were out there. She thought that the Audubon Society itself ought to set a headquarters in Oklahoma, in Kingfisher, because of all the birds out there. Okay, so, you know, that I think will just be a nice thing coming out of the airport's troubles. you know, it'll be a nice thing coming out of what Kingfisher Trails can give to the community. But hopefully, we don't do much to mess that up. We just let people come see it. If they want to come bird, let them come bird, right? What do you guys-
Well, we're also talking about cost to the city. And
Yeah.
so you've always got in life cost and benefits and cost and benefits. So airports are a big deal for communities.
Oh, sure.
So the net result of a positive impact to the airport is a net benefit to the community. Will there be some cost? Yes. Do we feel like they're far less than the benefit? Yes.
Yeah. And if people come to enjoy the wonderful birding
Oh, yeah.
down there on the Oxbow,
Right.
that's a positive thing, whether they're local guys or out of towners, you know, they'll come eat, they'll, you know, it's all good.
There's a bit of history down there too. I don't know if you spoke to that or not. But when you're down there in that Oxbow, there used to be an old railroad spur
Yeah.
for people that are really into
This
that
is the
history.
Katy Railroad, that
Yeah.
curve right here.
Yeah.
You can still see the pilings down in the creek
Yeah.
or where the bridge was.
Another interesting aspect to it.
So, guys, I don't want to keep you longer, you want to be here, but I want to make sure that we, does that all make sense? Yes.
What's the rationale between moving soil from the airport to that area? Is it because that area does not have right now the appropriate soil to be considered a wetland, or why else?
Bing, 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 that's right.
So you're creating an artificial one by bringing in the soil that qualifies and then planting the plants that qualify.
You got it.
Okay. And just expanding another area that already qualifies, that's not an option?
There wasn't another place in Kingfisher that would score enough points to be a mitigation thing for the airport.
There has to
Right.
be the three elements have to be there. The creek, that we're creating with the drainage ditch. Then the emerging wetlands and the forested wetlands has to be all there. And there's no place, this is the best match, really very pleased. And the fact that you don't have the emerging and forested, so they're gonna have to be created basically.
So there is a really nice wetlands thing, and if you go look on the federal wetlands list, the Harry's Hole thing shows up as a wetlands, but it doesn't qualify for this because it doesn't have a stream flowing into it. So they could make that way bigger, but it doesn't really help.
We feel like we're quite fortunate to bring all these things together. To get a cooperative landowner, that's huge.
That's really
Okay,
nice.
we have a cooperative landowner. We have an opportunity to not only meet technically the designation that is needed, but we also have an opportunity to provide a public good, for every citizen to enjoy.
And then there's advantages, if we had to, revert and do it on the airport, it's gonna be very costly. I don't know how much, my guess is over $1 million, and that's money that we don't have, money we would have to use out of our budget to extend the runway. And if we got other funding, it would cost the city a percentage. Plus, if it's on the airport, it's not accessible by the public, so it wouldn't be anything that anybody could enjoy like this. This is just a win-win, I think,
And
personally.
you're technically inviting birds when you create a
Absolutely,
wetland.
birds,
Okay.
birds and deer. And
You don't want
things
that on
don't
the-
go
on the
well with their
runway.
plants.
And things that don't go well with airplanes.
John, I have a question about this.
Yes.
Has the railroad been contacted to possibly,
That is a good
to allow us to use that as a wetlands?
Now,
No, but they shouldn't have anything to say about it.
Okay,
It's not on
okay,
their easement.
okay. It's not on their easement.
Okay. That's-
And is there any
yeah,
pipelines
we have
in
talked
the
to the
area?
railroad. They are very much about their easement. They're very controlling of it, but outside of that,
Okay.
they don't want to play in that game.
Is there any pipelines in that area that
I don't know.
would be a concern of?
Well, they're not, but the thing is, they're gonna do very little excavation. They're gonna knock the edges of that ravine down, or the ditch down, to make it like a stream, and they're going to you know, the excavation to create the wetlands, they say a foot is probably the max that they would go.
Is what they're taking down.
Right, it's not like they're gonna dig a pond.
Let me try it this way. Okay, I didn't talk about the budget. This is important. My computer hasn't hooked up to Microsoft in a long time, so anyway, please, this is what I've identified as the inputs, okay? Not the outputs, this is the inputs. Well, this is what I'm suggesting that the total grant be, $252,000. Okay, we would get there this way. DEQ professional services, that would be across 2 grants probably for $100,000. And they would kick in one in 2026, the other in 2027. There's no matching funds, okay? Tire Reclamation Fund, there's a fellow named Cole Kennedy who met with Brian and I on site. He came out. He has a thing, you know, when you buy a tire, you got to pay $1 to, well, he's got the funds of the state that are those things from, well, turns out that a lot of people have buried tires out there. I mean, you can see them. They're laying all over the place. There's tires. Well, that means that it qualifies for the tire reclamation money. And across 1 or 2 grants, I think we can get. I think these are pretty realistic monies. Private funding, this would be funding that Kingfisher Trails would be raising normally. There are various ways we can get there. I can show you, talk with you more about that later. Outdoor classroom, that's money from the Fish and Wildlife Service. And all it would mean is that along through this area, there would be some signs that Isabel Valderrama here with TSET would help us do, and they would tell us about the wildlife. There's already some of them out there at the Francis Nature Trail. I think that, you know, healthy living would help us with that, and these two go together, right? So we got the guy from Tulsa, Fish and Wildlife Service. He's coming here next month. And so we do those things. We'd have, Fish and Wildlife Service. This is other money they have for planting wildflowers. Again, pretty certain that we could do that, okay? Kingfisher Trails, Inc., that would be money tied to me, okay? Keep Oklahoma Beautiful, this is money tied to trees. We, for the last 2 years, have gotten $5,000 for planting trees from Kiko. Again, fairly certain thing. City of Kingfisher, 2 things. One is $12,000 that would be in kind. That means by using their equipment and people, we could get some, you know, that would be in kind, right? I would just say, well, this is the loader that they use to do some work, and this is what it's valued, yada yada. Okay. $26,000. What we could do is just use some city staff that they're already paying, and I would say, okay, well, here's money that we're paying staff, and the staff has some responsibility for overseeing it, right? There it is. These things are not new money, right? Kingfisher County has not yet agreed, but basically this is not inside the city limits, it's outside the city limits. It's reasonable to get the county to participate a little bit with some gravel out there. Okay, that's what that's all about. And voila, there you go. Now, one of the things that I specialize in doing for the city on this is writing line items that give us flexibility, right? So it's very, very important that, that what I'm saying we're doing gives us all kinds of flexibility about how we, in the end, account for what the inputs are. Okay, so we can talk more about that if you want, but that's the basic idea. Then let me see if I can.
So while you're taking a catching your breath just a minute.
All right.
I want people to know I'm leaving, but not because I've lost interest. I have a business meeting yet tonight, okay? And some of you all are new faces in this arena to me. And I just want you to know, if you support community improvements and life quality improvements and these kinds of projects, be sure to show your appreciation to this man, because nothing happens without him. Kingfisher is a special and rare community, and we have a special and rare asset in this man that puts his heart into it the way he does. So,
Okay, without logging into thanks, I appreciate that. Without logging into Microsoft, I can't scroll down and show you the other thing. Basically, we spend $50,000 roughly to get the land. We'd spend, gee, I'm so disappointed, I can't hold this up. Let me, how are we doing on time, guys?
1 hour.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it to an hour, and we're just about there. So the money we would spend $252,000 on, we'd spend $60,000 on a trail that would be just through Harry's Hole, okay? And then we'd spend some money doing the signs and the outdoor classroom. But then we basically spend a whole lot of money doing what the airport needs done, right? We'd spend a lot of money moving earth, planting trees, and creating what you just saw. So my goal is to try to save Bill and company at least $252,000, or thereabouts, 200, you know, upwards of $200,000.
Saving us well over a bit.
Right.
Costing, I mean, trading $1 million.
So, there we go. And I'll tell you what I will do. If you've given me your email, or if you want to after the meeting, I'll email everybody out the document, not only what you got, you can take that. I'll give it to you in digital form by email. I'll also give you the budget by email, and you know, that big site map, and I'll be available for questions. All right?
Thank you, John, and good luck on the grant.
All right, well, thank you. Well, we kept it to an hour, guys. You're dismissed, and I'm available if you got questions. Thanks, everybody.